What would you do if you believed you could do something about global warming? What would you actually do? What if you knew you might be able to save hundreds of millions of human lives and half the species on this planet? Would you get off your ass and do something? Me, I decided I would. So I started to write a book about a different future, one where we've given humanity a chance at a better life. The book is called The Eromanga Disruption. On the following pages is the science that drove this book into existence. Take a look at the different future we could have if we all worked together. The bad news. Global warming is bad news, so we do our best to ignore it. What we really need to do is shift the discussion from us against them to working together, what can we do right now to turn this around? How can we dramatically reduce atmospheric CO2, counter the effects of global sea rise, and combat global atmospheric warming? Here's an idea that could point the conversation in the right direction. What's the problem? Climate change is not one problem, it's several, and we really need to try and solve as many of these problems as we can. One big problem is that we are now regularly above 400 parts per million of atmospheric CO2. In just 150 years, we've gone from 280 parts per million to over 400 parts per million today. The last time we had over 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere was 3 million years ago, when the Earth was covered in active volcanoes. Driving electric cars and switching to solar power is simply not going to be enough. We need to be proactive and in a big way. Another problem is our oceans are heating up. Just like water on a stove, as the Earth's oceans warm, they expand. And they are already beginning to expand all over our coastal cities. Fortifying coastal cities and building dikes around coastlines is an idea that will work, just not for very long. We need to absorb this expansion and reduce the heat in a safe and controlled way. We need to challenge ourselves to find new solutions. Despite what the deniers might say, the vast majority of scientists agree. 80 National Academies of Science endorse the scientific consensus on climate change. We are causing this. Our future as climate scientists see it. The problem with this is, public perception of scientific consensus has been found to be a gateway belief, affecting other climate beliefs and attitudes, including policy support. All of these science organisations agree most of the global warming in recent decades can be attributed to human activities. However, they are opposed by over 100 groups funded and supported by the energy sector. Since 1997, the Koch brothers, oil, gas and coal, have spent over $100 million directly funding 84 groups, all denying climate change science. Peabody Energy, America's biggest coal mining company, funded more than 20 other groups, all disseminating man-made climate change denial information and opposing environment regulations that might impact their profits. These privately funded groups collectively are the heart and soul of climate denial. The fact is, just 100 oil, coal and gas companies are linked to 71% of all emissions since 1988. Climate change deniers are definitely right about two things. The world has been warm before, and the seas have been much higher than they are today. The difference is that then we didn't have billions of people living in vast coastal cities. To survive climate change, our cities have to be relocated and the coastlines cleansed to ensure that the rising seas don't drag all our cities' poisonous toxins back out into our coastal fisheries and kill them. So they, and we, can survive. If we don't do this, and very soon, in our grandchildren's lifetimes, scenes like Fukushima and New Orleans will become the new normal, with our coastal oceans turning black and dying from toxic poisons all over the planet. Instead of blaming each other and doing more studies on how bad this is going to get, why don't we proactively manage this flooding and try and bring the opposing voices on board with climate change? It's going to happen anyway, why not control it? Why not develop systems to direct and manage this global sea rise for the benefit of mankind. By doing this, we can save hundreds of millions of living creatures, including ourselves. At the same time, we can provide new jobs, new healthy food, help our oceans recover from the damage we've caused, and provide sources of new energy as well. Here's one example of what could be done. Why not go back to the future? Today, Australia is mostly arid, but it wasn't always like this. Around 60 million years ago, the Australian outback was filled by a vibrant inland sea called Eromanga. Eromanga covered 1.2 million square kilometres of Central Australia. Back then, Australia was a lush tropical place. The Eromanga Sea was inhabited by millions of amazing sea creatures, and all around its coasts lived a diverse range of plants and animals. The fossils of many of these sea creatures can still be found today. They are the gemstones known as opal. If Australians can survive droughts, bushfires, heatwaves and violent storms, it's almost certain they will see Australia flood again, creating a new Eromanga Sea. This will happen because with our oceans overheating and expanding, all that water has to go somewhere. And because Australia's red centre is 16 metres below sea level at its lowest point, once the oceans rise, they will rush over the coast just like they did millions of years ago, and a new Eromanga Sea will be formed. Next problem. Around 75% of the air that we breathe comes from the ocean's creatures and plants. Only 25% comes from land plants and forests. Overall, our seas are a huge source of our wealth. The gross domestic product, GDP, of our oceans makes them the 7th largest economy in the world. We are killing them with toxins, and it's about to get worse. Most of our planet's CO2 conversion and oxygen production occurs due to the phytoplankton, sea plants and abundant sea life living in our shallow coastal waters called the neritic zones. And we're about to flood these neritic zones with our city's toxic wastes. Neritic zones are the most productive part of our oceans. They currently make up 8% of our oceans, and all of these zones are in our shallow coastal waters, the very waters we're about to destroy with our toxic city wastes. For our survival, it is vital we have healthy neritic zones. Stage 1 of the plan calls for the construction of a 15 metre deep, 500 metre wide canal, 220 kilometres in length, all the way from the coast of Port Augusta to Lake Frome. Stage 2 is a similar canal from the Gulf of Carpentaria. By building a 15 metre high dike around the Eromanga Basin and flooding it to an average depth of 20 metres, we can recreate an inland sea, nutrient-rich, organic, plastic-free, alkaline and around half the size of the Mediterranean, all within 20 years. A new Eromanga Sea could create 1.2 million square kilometres of pristine neritic zone, providing new coastlines for homes, industries and vast new food resources, all of it safe from flooding, acidification and plastic waste contamination. Eromanga itself could absorb around 9 million tonnes of CO2 per annum, with a sequestration value of around $210 million US. 170 million of that comes from the phytoplankton alone. The surrounding wetlands, forests and farms will absorb significantly more. Due to variable biological factors such as iron availability and temperature gradients affecting solubility of CO2, these figures are variable. However, they should all be considered to be conservative. A significant advantage of doing this is the global evaporation and transpiration system will transport water back up to the atmosphere on an ongoing basis. We don't just fill Eromanga up once, we keep filling it. Evaporations from seas, lakes and rivers provide roughly 90% of the moisture in our atmosphere. Plants deliver the other 10%. A conservative estimate of evaporation from Eromanga region of 1.2 metres per year would allow for an ongoing reduction of sea level across the Pacific Ocean of 0.5 centimetres per annum. Why flood the red centre? Central Australia has a huge asset for growing phytoplankton. Over millions of years of weathering, Central Australia's soils have become very thick and full of iron oxides. Essentially, Central Australia is red because it's rusty. These soils are high in iron but low in the nutrients and organic matter needed for growing terrestrial plants. For growing phytoplankton, however, they are ideal. Soils filled with iron, lots of iron. Planting mangroves can support these neritic zones by providing homes for billions of juvenile fish and crustaceans. Plus, mangroves act as buffers to dissipate wind and wave energy and reduce tidal surge, so they will help secure Eromanga's coastlines in place. Mangroves also store up to 10 times more carbon than terrestrial forests. Currently, sea level rise is changing where mangroves can grow. They can only live in a tidal zone, needing both wet and dry time. Too little and they dry out, and too much they drown. In Eromanga, mangroves will be in a stable sea with regular tides and be able to flourish. Mangroves also have properties important to the synthesis of medicines for cancer, plus antimicrobial agents for cholera, fevers, malaria, diarrhoea, even cholesterol levels. For the protection of native wildlife and plants, it is vital a 100-kilometre wide organic exclusion zone is put in place. By restricting the types of housing industries permitted in the region, we can protect the integrity of Eromanga's waters and guarantee long-term sustainability. So, how do we do it? Well, it's complex and simple and basic and grand all at once. The technologies all exist. The reasons are clear. The funding is obtainable. We just need the will and some inspiration. First, we need to build 3 large canals over a 20-year time span and pump filtered, cooled ocean water into Eromanga as fast as we can. The canals would operate on a closed energy system, lined with heat exchangers to extract heat energy for power generation, desalination plants to collect and store salt for molten salt energy storage, impellers to keep the canals flowing, and plastic extractors to keep them pollution-free. Most of the energy needs for this can be met by combining molten salt energy storage with large solar arrays to utilise the power of the sun. Towering solar arrays can heat salt into a molten liquid state. From here it can be pumped and stored in large vats and used to drive turbines for power generation. Salt has the amazing ability to store high levels of heat and be recycled over and over. Plus, salt can be pumped as a liquid when it's molten. Salt can be used in this way for recycling energy almost indefinitely. The salt lakes of Central Australia are an extraordinary resource for energy storage capacity. Overnight, heat stored in molten salt is used to create steam, driving turbines to generate electricity, powering the Eromanga pumping and filtering systems as well as many of Australia's cities. Additionally, solar paving on roadways lining canal embankments, when combined with molten salt storage units, can deliver supplementary power for pumping and desalination and also meet regional energy needs. Alternately, Australia is estimated to have 25% of the world's reserves of thorium. 4th-generation thorium molten salt reactors operate at much lower pressures than uranium reactors, with inbuilt shutdown systems. Many scientists consider them fail-proof. All the region's energy needs could be met with just 3 thorium molten salt reactors. Thorium is cheaper, more abundant, easier to handle, and much safer than uranium used in today's reactors. Why thorium? Thorium fuel rods remain in the reactor about 3 times as long as conventional nuclear fuel, cutting the volume of spent nuclear fuel by as much as 2/3. Overall, 90% less radioactive waste is produced by volume. Thus, nuclear waste disposal for a 1 gigawatt thorium power plant would cost an estimated $1 million per year or less of operation. Also, thorium nuclear fuel rods reduce the possibility that weapons-grade material would result from the process. The thorium fuel cycle can actually dispose of existing toxic plutonium stockpiles. Since the fuel and coolant are at atmospheric pressure, a leak doesn't automatically result in the expulsion of fuel and coolant. This is a major safety advantage that enables passive decay heat removal, preventing outcomes like Fukushima. Capital costs of thorium reactors are estimated to be less than 75% of conventional reactors due to ease of operation, lower risks, and less manpower required to operate them. Projected operational savings are 90% of an equivalent uranium system. The next problem to solve is: we all know the world's ice sheets are breaking up. This does 2 things. Depending on where it is, this ice can significantly increase sea levels, but regardless of where it is, due to its high albedo or reflectivity, losing this ice reduces our planet's ability to send heat back into space. The more ice we lose, the hotter it will get. So we need more clouds to reflect and transport some heat back into space. Clouds that form over Eromanga will deliver nourishing rains to allow the greening of Australia once again. 23% of absorbed solar energy is carried into clouds as latent heat in water vapour. From there, this heat travels into the upper atmosphere to be radiated back into space. This clouding effect will accelerate the greening of Central Australia, promoting forest and plant growth to uptake even more CO2, generate more oxygen, and contribute to a lower albedo in the upper atmosphere above Central Australia. Just like rainforests, phytoplankton give off tiny organic oil particles into the atmosphere that seed the formation of clouds. High in the atmosphere, water droplets gather around these oil particulates, form into clouds, and eventually fall as rain, in this case delivering water to the dry Australian continent. The potential benefit to the Indigenous populations from participating in or managing of the farming, licensing, harvesting, sales, or leasing of aquaculture and coastal land and farming rights are extraordinary. The potential to deliver healthy growth, independence, and a strong position in Australia's future for Indigenous Australians is both timely and unrivalled in history. By custom designing our own organic sea, we can decide who the apex predator species is. It might be kingfish, turtles, seals, dolphin, or sharks. We need to create the best possible environment so we and they can thrive. Why algae? Algal biomass's 3 main components are carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Once the lipids have been extracted for biodiesel, leftover carbohydrates can be converted into sugars. Depending on the strain of algae, these sugars can be either simple or complex, some of which can be then used for ethanol production. It is possible to produce both biodiesel and ethanol from algal byproduct. Comparison of average oil yields from oil seeds and algae. This table presents indicative oil yields from various oil seeds and algae. There can be significant variations in yield even within individual crops, locations, varieties and grades of the plant, and from different strains of algae. The data presented here is indicative. However, there is a dramatic order of magnitude difference between oil yields of algae when compared with other oilseed sources such as oil palm, corn and rapeseed. Yields are in litres per hectare per year. Pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical applications for phytoplankton or marine microalgae are hugely underutilised. Algae offer complete new families of antibiotics and are abundant in compounds referred to as nucleotides, cellular energy units that act as biological batteries to recharge cells. Marine phytoplanktons are 5 times smaller than red blood vessels, so they're easy for your body to absorb and use and readily assimilated upon ingestion. Phytoplankton are a rich source of omega-3s, a proven anti-inflammatory, and phytoplankton has more omega-3s by weight than any other food source. Phytoplankton also contains beta-carotene, which helps to protect your corneas, is effective for improving vision, plus chromium, which regulates blood sugar and helps insulin move glucose. It also helps your body to metabolize carbohydrates and fats. Phytoplanktons offer complete new generations of safer, greener plastics, using the natural polymers in algal seaweeds to produce biodegradable, biocompostable plastic alternatives that can be reused as soil fertilizers. Different species of phytoplankton deliver a significant variance in oil volumes as well as biochemical properties. Creating the new biome will also mean harvesting the bounty. Giant catamarans, skimmers 300 metres long with solar decks, wings and foils, powered by electric jets and guided by satellite, can harvest phytoplankton at its most nutritious to ensure the highest oil and nutritional yields. We also have the technology to develop specialist fishers and weed trimming skimmers that can harvest fish and the vast kelp forests, delivering nutrition-rich bounty of food, pharmaceuticals, oils and feedstock for ethanol and animals on farms outside the exclusion zone. Because different species of algae give off different colours of bioluminescence, it is likely the skimmers harvesting at night will be a spectacle unlike any other. The final phase, saving the creatures of our oceans, so they can save us and the planet. The Southern Ocean is a high nutrient, low chlorophyll area. This limits photosynthesis and growth. Primary production in the Southern Ocean is restricted by the low availability of iron, a vital micronutrient for phytoplankton growth. Around the bottom of the world flows the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. It's constantly distributing nutrients to all the creatures that live there, and its health is vital for our survival. Once the final northern canal is completed, it will be possible to reverse the flow of the southern canal and pump cooled, alkaline, phytoplankton and iron-rich water from Eromanga into the circumpolar current in the Southern Ocean. We can rebalance ocean acidity, resalinate the Southern Ocean, feed and nurture the entire global food chain with organically grown, plastic-free live phytoplankton, feeding whales, seals, penguins, seabirds like albatross, gannets and gulls, replenish species of fish and crustaceans right around the world. We can do this. We have to for survival.